Today let's talk about photography block. Everyone knows what writer's block is. It's when a writer is just unable to put pen to paper and actually start to write a story or work on their story, or they're stuck in some way from continuing to write. And that can happen in any creative pursuit, but also in photography. So that means you're struggling to go out and get an image. You're struggling to take pictures. You're struggling to find something that you want to take a picture of. Both writer's block and photographer's block, any sort of creative block, stem from one place, and that is fear. We become scared to create something. We become scared to put pen to paper or to pick up the camera because we're making ourselves vulnerable through that act of creation. As soon as we take that picture, it has become something real. We've turned our thought into something real. To create something, we have to have an idea of what we want to create. We have to have some level of expectations, and through creating it, creating a reality of what our idea, we are scared to fail. We're scared to screw up the image. We're scared to put ourselves out there and get critiqued for it. That fear comes from an insecurity. We're scared because that image is going to be a part of what makes us. It's a part of ourselves that we're giving to other people. And we start to question it. We start to question the settings, whether you have enough experience, whether you think it's good enough. You start to question whether it's what you want to be photographing. If you're in an environment where you struggle to find inspiration, then it makes it more difficult. For example, many years ago, I had a very rough photography block. I was unable to take pictures for a couple of years. I really struggled to go out and get pictures, and I was stagnating. I wasn't advancing my photography. I was always questioning whether I was good enough, and to be honest, at the time, I wasn't. I was in an uninspiring place. For me, that's the city. I find it really difficult to create in the city. I feel so self-conscious with other people around, and I find it difficult to make something in a city. That other people can dive right in and they're great with that, but that's not me in general. Because I wasn't in a very inspiring place, I didn't really look with my eye for compositions. I started to critique everything, and I started to question my abilities as a photographer. I was lacking a bit of self-confidence in my abilities and in myself in general, and that bled through to my work. Since then, I have learned a lot more about photography and myself, to the point that I'm able to put myself out there on a weekly basis through this YouTube channel. And to be honest, it doesn't mean that I have completely overcome those insecurities, those questions of doubt. It just means that I'm better able to control them and manage them to continue creating both photography and videos. I think it would be impossible to completely overcome those insecurities. Those insecurities help us to keep improving. They teach us to keep learning about the subject. I am still a bit nervous every time I take a picture and post it on Instagram or something like that, and I'm always a bit nervous when I post one of these videos. It's normal. As I said, I'm putting a piece of myself out there, and negative feedback and stuff like that is something that lives online. You just got to learn not to take it personally, but it can be quite difficult. But each time I take an image or I post a video, it gets a little easier. The first one is always the hardest one, and you can see that in my first vlog. What I am doing is not letting that insecurity, those fears, prevent me from creating. And it's the same with photography block. The only way to get through it is to press the shutter. It doesn't matter if the image is bad, it doesn't matter what the image is of. The only way that you'll get through it and start creating again and start thinking creatively and seeing compositions that you want to take is through that first act of taking a single image. I've sort of fallen back into a bit of a photography block. I'm struggling to pick up the camera. I started creating excuses for not going out with the camera, what's the point? It's not the subjects that I want. It's not pure landscape. It's not wildlife photography. Those things that I thought I should be working on and focusing on in photography, they were something else. Those things are just not possible to do here in the city. But the truth of it is that I was just scared of failing. I was scared of trying something new, of doing a different style of photography. So because I was struggling to find inspiration for the city, where better to turn to than YouTube and Instagram and Flickr and other photography outlets to see other people's work and get some inspiration about what is possible in the city. By looking through these other photographers' work and trying to see what is possible, I ended up coming up with a little exercise just to train my eye for composition and just to keep practicing, just to keep creating, just to keep taking pictures, which I mentioned in last week's video. And it was just a simple exercise, just to go for a walk every day with my camera and come home with one image, at least one image. And I'm glad to say that throughout the week I managed to take more than one image every day. The other thing I did for this challenge was to limit myself to one lens, and that is my Canon 50mm 1.8. 1.8 lens. Is very cheap, very easy, and quite small, as you can see on my massive 1DX body. 1DX Mark II even. I also left at home my tripod and any other piece of equipment because I didn't want those things to be in my way, stopping me from getting an image. I went handheld and I just walked around with it in my hands like this and just took pictures randomly when I saw something that I think looked good. All in all, I ended up with over 30 images and I'm really happy about that. It really shows that I was trying and that I was trying to see differently. I got subjects that I would normally just walk past, and I think that shows that I'm working through my photography blog. So when the images come up, they'll only have about 10 to 15 seconds so I can get through them all, because I want to show you my progress through this project and how things developed over the week. Pretty much all of them would not end up in my portfolio, to be honest. It's not that they're bad images, technically they're okay, it's just not what I would normally photograph, and it could be said that the subjects are a bit mundane, but it was a really fun project and I had a lot of fun and it really helped me push through this block. I was out creating something every day and that felt good. That felt really good. I was examining different styles, different ideas of photography and different genres. As I said, documentary and street photography sort of came into it a bit. You will notice that I've converted the majority of them to black and white, and that's because the colour was proving to be quite distracting in the edit, and I felt like by converting it to black and white, it simplified the composition so you can actually really focus on the subject. The only times that I really kept it in colour was when the colour was a big part of the composition where the image wouldn't work if it wasn't in colour. So basically when there was like contrasting colours or something like that tied the image together. So let's jump into how day one went and have a look at some of the images that I managed to get on a really quite rainy day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the images play through and then we'll move on to the next day and go straight into the next set of images. So on that first day, I was very focused on shooting architectural images, focusing on subjects that were a little different and a little bit abstract at times. I was really trying to look for shapes and contrast and bring those into an image because I knew they would work well in black and white, and especially with that cloud-filled sky that provided a white background, a really neutral background, much better than if it was a blue sky, because with a blue sky converted to black and white it would have ended up as a dark grey. But by having it in with a cloud sky, it created this really white, stark, contrasting background to the subjects. I did this type of photography in the past when I was traveling, It's simple, it's easy, it's fun, and little pieces of architecture have always stood out to me, especially when you look up above from the street level. The designs are just completely different to what we know, and I really like that, such as that statue at the end. And with that, let's move on to the next day.
The first thing that caught my eye was this carving into the wall with a window. Just the contrast of shapes, the contrast of colours. I thought it made a nice image.
Throughout this experiment, I wanted to try different styles of photography. So I was experimenting with sort of like a documentary style of photography, photographing more mundane subjects with the idea of there was something about those subjects that caught my attention. With each passing day, I was starting to see more compositions and possibilities in subjects, and I was really trying to break through that wall of what I think I should be creating. Some of the images I left in colour, as you can see, and that's because I felt like the colour was an integral part of it, such as the blue door and orange wall. The contrasting colours is what I thought was quite nice about that image.
As I was walking around Como, I eventually came to they're not really seaplanes, they're just aquaplanes. I came in as one was landing and pulling into the dock, and I thought that was quite interesting, so I got a quick snapshot of that, and then I got a shot of the plane as well. And if you look along the pigeons, you'll see another plane moving through the water in the background, which is quite cool.
And again, you can see through the images that the architectural features were what were catching my eye that day. So that was quite a good day. I managed to take about 10 images and I really enjoyed those, but the next day things didn't really go to plan. Just 2 images, much worse than the previous 2 days. I think that was to do with the time of day that I was going out. It was a bit later afternoon. There wasn't such strong light in the city centre. I was really trying to look for a contrast between like the light and the shadow, odd shapes created by that, and I just couldn't see those because there was no light in the city at that time of day. And because it was the afternoon, the streets were quite full of people. It was surprising, really, but we've recently changed zones, so there's more people out and about going to shops, more shops open, that sort of thing. And it was really quite busy. Because of that, I felt very self-conscious lifting up this giant brick to my face like that. I felt like I was on display a bit, and even when photographing like architectural stuff, I could feel people looking at me, and it doesn't feel good. I'm quite an introvert, so having that scrutiny by people sort of made me uncomfortable. So after hours of walking around, I came home with 2 images. But that happens, and it happened again the next day. So the same as yesterday, I only managed 2 images on this day. The first image was just a little bit of a snap of the hills. I just liked the way that there was the shadow of the clouds sitting over the hills and the lighter patches of it. I'd avoided taking that image before because I felt it was a bit flat, a bit static. There wasn't any foreground interest and that sort of thing. But the whole point of this experiment was to push past those expectations and just take a picture. The second one, as you saw, was a picture of a room. Now, to be clear, this wasn't a private house or anything like that. I was in a public space. It's a museum sort of space, and it's not open at the moment, and everything's closed, so there was no one likely to come into shot. But I just like the simplicity of the room, and I really like the reflection of the hill on the window as well. And that was sort of another experiment into the documentary style photography, photographing something a bit mundane, something a bit different to what I normally would think of as making a good image, and really trying to think of how someone who is trying to tell a story would think. That's the key about documentary photography, is to think about how images tell a story. Luckily, the next day, I managed to get a lot more images. I finally managed to do some proper street photography, photographing people. I've always really avoided photographing people in the past, but street photography was a big influence when I was first starting out in photography. I found it quite different and questioning in composition, not like your simple landscape image where, you know, like a mountain, river, and a foreground rock or something like that, you know, something very classical, which I do like. Street photography seems to be a bit more experimental, pushing the bounds of what is normally accepted within the photography world about composition in particular. And so I really wanted to, through this experiment, to give it a go, really try and photograph people. And having a big camera makes it really difficult. I mean, everyone would notice. So to get those images, I was walking along one day and I just decided to sit on the bench, and just as people walked past, I lifted the camera and got a quick couple shots, and that was it. Nothing really staggering in terms of street photography composition or subject, but it's important to me because it's the first time I've actually really experimented with trying street photography properly, of getting pictures of people and not of the architecture around them, but really focusing on getting a photo of a person walking into shot. I would like to continue working on this sort of street and documentary style photography in the future. The next set of images is from my last day of the experiment. My last day was sunny, although a little cold, and I'd really begun to enjoy walking around with the camera, looking for different compositions and different ideas. My first couple subjects of the water on the lake interacting with the light and the patterns on the bark of a tree were perfect subjects to get my creativity to flow. And as you can see, I ended up going very abstract with these images. I was still looking for those architectural details, and the brutalist structure of the statue right on the shore of the lake sort of caught my attention that day, the way it was interacting with the light. So I ended up just photographing shadows and patterns within this structure. There were plenty of compositions to be had, and it was quite fun to explore them. My favourite one was where the hole through the centre of the frame is at an angle and appears like an entrance to the dark abyss. The way the monument has been situated means at different times of day the light will interact with it in different ways, and it will be interesting to see how it looks in the summer when the sun is at a different angle. All the images were a bit abstract and architectural, except for the last image was another street photography shot, another street photo, just a simple shot of a man feeding the birds. He was feeding the swans and the pigeons and the seagulls. He didn't care, he was just throwing the food up, which was quite nice. The whole point of this experiment was to try something different, to push through what I thought my photography should be, to try and see compositions in a different way, and to try different styles of photography. I was really trying to work through a block that I was creating for myself. To be honest, none of the images are ecstatically brilliant. I like some of them. I think some of them are quite intriguing, especially some of the more abstract ones, but that's because I like that sort of photography. But like the street photography, it is very amateurish and it's the first attempt, so I'm pleased that I gave it a go. The hardest part of each day was lifting the camera up and taking an image. The first one is always the hardest. Once I was able to take that first image and work through that block and naturally start thinking a bit more compositionally, I was a bit looser. I felt a bit more confident and I felt a bit more creatively able. Certainly I want to keep trying to work on street photography as I progress. I'm also going to do more research about documentary, travel and street photography, about different photographers, see examples of their work so I can try out their styles and just work on it a bit more like you would in any photography discipline. I do love my landscape and wildlife photography, but I'm just trying not to limit myself to only those when I really can't go out and create in the way that I want to. So it's good to keep pushing those boundaries and to keep trying something new. The one thing that this experiment accomplished really well was to give me inspiration and motivation to keep going out and getting pictures, and that really means that I've gotten through that block. I'm really trying to get out and get pictures. So if you are struggling with photographer block or writer's block or artist block, any sort of creative block, then the only way that you can really work through it is just to put pen to paper, brush to canvas, or pick up the camera and just take an image. As soon as you take that first one, as soon as you start something, you will keep wanting to create. It will provide you with that motivation that you need to go out and try something different and to keep taking pictures. Don't let that fear hold you back, that fear of failing to create in a certain way. Just go out and do it for you. Forget about everything else and just try. You'll be more pleased with the results than not doing it. I can tell you that for sure. And if you are not confident in your skills or abilities, just the only way you're going to overcome that is by learning and trying. And that's really the best thing that you can do, is just take a picture. Those moments of inspiration, those moments of seeing things differently and of creating something different, they can only really come when we are working. There's no point, even in landscape photography, you know, you can't create an amazing landscape picture from the comfortableness of your sofa. You've got to go out and get out and be there at the right time of day. I'm going to shut up now. I hope you've enjoyed the images. I'd be interested to know which ones you thought were the better ones of the set. I know there was a lot to go through, but I wanted to really bring you along on the journey so you can see everything that I saw and sort of feel everything that I took. If you've liked today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see what's coming up in my experiments with photography, then hit that subscribe button. I think next week I'm going to be doing a video about ICM. A few months ago I did a video featuring a lot of ICM photography, but I didn't really explain what I was doing very well. So I'm going to make a vlog about the process with ICM photography. And the great thing about it is it's very free and abstract in nature, and you can do it pretty much anywhere. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next one.